Chapter 1. Shh. Yes, it hurt. It was definitely not just a bruise. Yes, she was scared. Her throat was raw from screaming. Cautiously, Katrina Nguyen felt under her bed. Girl clothes, boy clothes, money, birth certificate, social security card, toothbrush, spare glasses, backup battery, makeup, estradiol, spironolactone. Katrina had made an escape bag the first time her father threatened to kill her. At first, the bag seemed in case of emergency, a glass that one would never break. But after tonight, why had she let it come to this? Why couldn't she be what her parents wanted? Part of her was in a panic. What have you done? Apologize. Knock on their door right now. Say it's all your fault. Say you're sorry. Say you'll promise to change. But another, stronger part of Katrina was calm, even cold. You have to escape, tonight. Breathe, be quiet, and listen. And so, Katrina listened. For footsteps, for breathing, for sleep. She listened and listened. Through the dark, she heard her mother's one last cough, her father's one last flush. And then, finally, there was silence. Katrina clutched at her ribs, then propped herself up. The pain was sharp, but manageable. She was in her room, behind a locked door. All she needed to do was be quiet and calm. She could do this. She could do this. By the light of her phone, Katrina applied concealer around her eye and to her cheek. It would be better not to face the world with visible bruises. Then she placed a note on her bed. In it, she had written that she was sorry, that she wished she'd never been born, that she didn't want to make them angry, and that she'd never bother them again. That part was true. But then she wrote that she was going to San Francisco. There'd be no reason to doubt her. Of course she would go there. That's where the queers went. Her father would punch the wall, throw something heavy and breakable. Her mother would cross herself and utter a prayer. In a day or two, her mother would call Tia Claudia across the bay to find their stupid son and send him home. By that time, though, she'd be almost 400 miles away. Silently, Katrina put on her coat. She slid open her bedroom window. Outside, there was a noise from a police helicopter, noise from some family next door. There was noise from the highway, from nice cars leaving and less nice cars coming home. Yet, Katrina moved steadily, almost gracefully, as she gathered what she needed. Ticket, laptop, escape bag, violin. Then Katrina crawled atop her desk and dropped to the ground. Mercifully, adrenaline overrode her pain. She reached up, slid the window closed, and looked at her phone. Good. There was still time. As quickly as she could, Katrina limped past the neighbors, the highway, the cars, the police helicopter overhead. She'd catch Bart to Oakland, then find somewhere to wait out the night. In the morning, she'd get on a big white bus to Los Angeles. Those who have never ridden a big white Asian bus probably never will. These buses don't load at Greyhound bus depots or train stations. Instead, one catches them at an Asian shopping center or supermarket. Some are Vietnamese. A few are Korean. Many are Chinese. Some trek to Las Vegas. Others shuttle to the casinos of Morongo, Pachanga, San Manuel. Yet another subset runs along a network of Asian communities throughout the state. Oakland Chinatown, San Francisco Chinatown, Little Saigon, San Diego Chinatown. And of course, fleets of them converge on the San Gabriel Valley, Rosemead, San Gabriel, Monterey Park. and the rest of the Asian American Holy Land. I think girl, the woman said. She didn't bother whispering. So what if the kid could hear? They were speaking Cantonese. The young ones were either Americanized or learning Mandarin. Not girl, the other woman insisted. Too ugly to be girl. But she's wearing makeup. There was silence. Too ugly to be girl, she finally agreed. Definitely boy. To be a girl would be sad. Yes, so sad. Those women were around her mother's age. They could have been her mother's friends. She didn't need to understand them, for it blended with the chatter that she heard every day. Katrina didn't try to block their words. She had given up on that long ago. Instead, Katrina leaned her head against the window and listened to the voices of the women, the drone of the engine, the roar of a passing truck. She listened to the pain in her ribs, the throbbing keeping time with each swerve and bump in the road. It was all music. Let it be music. If she could make it music, Katrina knew there would be a place where she could breathe, a place where she could rest. She cradled her violin. She heard a melody. Finally, Katrina Nguyen let herself sleep. Shizuka Satomi opened her eyes. 24 hours ago, she had been in Tokyo. As if on cue, Shizuka's thoughts were interrupted by a most horrible sound, as if a violin were choking on a windshield wiper. Who could possibly be creating such infernal... Oh, of course. Shizuka stilled her breathing and listened further. In addition to the rooster, there were also 2 hens, pigeons, 4 of them, a duck, an old Asian woman humming a pentatonic folk song, a freeway in the distance, and someone just drove up in a Mercedes. No other place sounded like this. The Aguilars lived in the yellow house on the corner where the Laos and the next door the Lius. This was her house in Los Angeles, Monterey Park to be exact. She was home. Shizuka looked about her room. Thanks to Astrid, her move was already complete. Clothing, furniture, her instruments, all were ready and waiting. Her car had made the trip from Japan and was parked in the driveway downstairs. The only item she had personally brought with her lay on her nightstand. It was a long, thin music case, old, battered, yet exquisitely made. What it held seemed almost impatient, calling from just beyond hearing. Not yet, Shizuka thought, but soon. As the rooster crowed again, Shizuka stood and stretched. She had timed her sleep perfectly. Even with the jet lag, she felt as if she had taken a refreshing afternoon nap. Of course, she'd be exhausted in the evening, but if all went as planned, she would have already found who she was looking for. By the time Shizuka came downstairs, Astrid already had her breakfast ready. Rice porridge, hot tea, a soft boiled egg. There was also a peeled tangerine. Astrid, I didn't ask for. From Mrs. Aguilar, Astrid explained. She brought a whole bag. Won't you have one? They're really sweet. Shizuka finished her egg, toast, and tea. I'd rather not give my body any surprises while it's still unsure of the time zone. Astrid shrugged. But Mrs. Aguilar said you always liked their tangerines. It was wonderfully sweet, just as always, and juicier than a winter fruit had any right to be. Every neighborhood should have a Mrs. Aguilar. Miss Atomi? Yes? Oh, I drifted a little. Astrid frowned. Miss Atomi, why don't you rest? It's only the preliminaries. The finals won't be held until next week, and Miss Grohl is sure to advance. Shizuka reapplied her lipstick, a little powder, then reached for her sunglasses. If she really is the 7th, that girl will have no need for the finals, will she? Chapter 2. 6 times Shizuka Satomi had created brilliance. 6 times she had taken an aspiring musician, trained them, formed them, and created a star. Each more incredible, while most teachers seemed to cultivate a characteristic sound or style, Satomi's students were at turns icy, devastating, blinding, delicate, frenetic, breathtakingly sensual. Her success, her touch, the effortlessness, almost inevitable way she pulled genius after genius from thin air was uncanny, almost supernatural. Little wonder, then, that people began to call her the Queen of Hell. However, it had been over a decade since she had taken on a new student. Why? Some believe she was the victim of a shattered heart. Before his death, Satomi's last student, Yifeng Brian Zheng, had been seen with her in Annecy, laughing over hot chocolate and a milfool. The dashing young violinist had thanked her from every stage he played, and in a television interview he claimed it was only after studying with Shizuka Satomi that he understood the true meaning of love. Perhaps they'd been more than teacher and student. Others surmised that the reason was more mundane, that she might have simply retired. The Queen of Hell had taught Yifeng Zheng, who had followed Kiana Choi, who had followed Sabrina Eisen, and so on, and so on. Even if she found another, what would be left to accomplish? Whatever the reason, with each passing year, more people assumed that the Queen of Hell had no intention of ever teaching again. Idiots. For 10 years, Shizuka Satomi had been searching. From Lausanne, Salzburg, Sydney, most recently Tokyo, she had listened, searched, prospect after prospect. Nothing. 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 Not that they didn't try. Not that musicians had not traveled to her, offered her everything they had, all they could imagine, as if all they could imagine could be close to enough. Others around her, including Tremont Philippe himself, had suggested she was being too selective, perhaps even arbitrary. Surely, over the past 10 years, she had found musicians who might be appropriate. Of course she had. Her previous 6 students had been an almost uninterrupted string of genius. All had been perfectly appropriate. Yet with each one, Shizuka became more and more aware that something was wrong. No, something was missing. As she watched each of them shine and fall, sparkle and burn, Shizuka became more and more obsessed with the music playing just beyond hearing. Maddeningly familiar, yet always beyond her grasp. Until finally, in Tokyo, she heard it. Through the din of 13 million people and vending machines, ramen joints, internet cafes, electric trains, and cherry blossoms for each of them twice over. She heard it, coming not from within that city, but from far across the sea. Coming from, of all places, home. Shizuka swerved past a very slow Lexus, then accelerated onto Huntington Drive. The San Gabriel Valley resembled an Asian American monopoly board. Cambodians, Chinese, Vietnamese, Laotians, Vietnamese Chinese, a few Koreans, even some Japanese crisscrossed past the working-class neighborhoods of Rosemead, Monterey Park, Almonte, through middle-class Temple City, San Gabriel, and Alhambra, all the way up to Boardwalk and Park Place, San Marino and Arcadia, where Shizuka was arriving now. She could feel herself breathing faster as she passed Santa Anita Plaza, a gilded shopping mall where one might procure truffle-filled dumplings, a Hello Kitty latte, and a $2,000 box of Chinese bird nest. Quickly, she sped by the Santa Anita racetrack, home of the fashionable 626 night market, drawing Asians of all persuasions for a night of stinky tofu, boba, taro macaroons, and international indie film screenings, until finally she arrived at her destination, Xinhua Phoenix Hall. Xinhua Phoenix Hall was actually the smaller of two buildings designed by the renowned Chinese architect An Wei. Across the courtyard, still shrouded in construction covers, was the site of Xinhua Phoenix Investment Bank's grand Golden Friendship Pavilion, due to open the following year. Between them was a massive fountain in the shape of an ever-flowing teapot. Inscribed in its side was a carved and gilded Yong, the character for eternity. It had seemed like Yong since Shizuka had so anticipated a performance. She didn't know exactly how she knew, but she knew. And when Tremont Philippe mentioned the Grohl girl, that was confirmation enough. By now she could almost feel it physically pulling her, a timeless music that her other students, for all their genius, had only been able to trace. Shizuka Satomi took a deep breath. There was no need to hurry. The Queen of Hell did not hurry. She checked her makeup one last time, then put on her sunglasses. Here would be her last and seventh student. Here would be her last and seventh soul. And then, what would be left to accomplish? Everything. When one hears violin competition, one may envision nervous contestants and a stage. But within the foyer and surrounding hallways, a whole other competition is being waged. Someone mentions a trip to Berlin. Another invokes Juilliard. In the foyer of Who is Who, students don't have teachers. Rather, they are studying with somebody, often identified only by last name, as in, she's studying with Korsakova. Regardless of age, whether the competition is international or local, amidst chatter and coffee in various accents, real and acquired, everyone wants to know. Who is more important than whom, and why? I see that the princess reigns as usual. Landon Fung of Friedberg Music in Temple City was talking to Ellen Seidel, a longtime violin teacher, also from Temple City. The princess, also known as Tamako Giselle Grohl, sat in a corner eating a tiny serving of macaroni potato salad. Amidst all the nervous patter around her, she seemed almost nonchalant as she reviewed her music. Did you tell her? Of course, but I told her she'd be watching via webcast. Good. I mean, why would Shizuka Satomi come here? Several people turned at the sound of the name. Landon? Shh! Sorry. Landon Fung nodded nervously. Of course she was not coming. She couldn't be. Ellen tried to downplay her excitement, but still, Shizuka Satomi, the Shizuka Satomi, had sent a letter saying she would be watching Tamako Grohl, Ellen Seidel's student, at this competition. Ellen Seidel had been teaching for years. She had endured spoiled students, careless students, untalented students, students with nightmare parents. And then came Tamako Giselle Grohl. Yes, the girl was difficult. She threw tantrums, behaved strangely, but she practiced, she obsessed, and she was a prodigy. To Ellen Seidel, Tamako was a reward for so much frustration, an affirmation from God. Ellen glanced at her star student. Tamako was clearly for the next step in her career. She needed to grow. Nobody stayed with one teacher. But no matter what, Ellen Seidel would always be her first. Most people assumed that Tamako's step would be conservatory, like Kilbourne School or perhaps Juilliard. Ellen agreed that this was logical. But Shizuka Satomi had nothing to do with logic, because Shizuka Satomi's last student was Yifeng Zheng, and before that, Kiana Choi, and before that, Sabrina Eisen, and so on, and so on. These were household names, well, at least in the household of violinists. Each had won medals. Each had been stars. Were Tamako to join the Pantheon, Ellen's life as her esteemed former teacher would never be the same. She'd accompany Shizuka and Tamako to Paris, Frankfurt, a 14-stop grand tour of Asia. Meanwhile, back home, a line of brilliant young students would be waiting, each eager for her wisdom, for a promise of greatness. "I'm studying with Seidel," they would say. And all this was possible if Shizuka Satomi, even if merely online, would watch Tammy. And then, without warning, someone gasped. Long black hair, blood-red dress, the timeless half-smile that a madman might paint, and of course, sunglasses hid her eyes. Shizuka Satomi, the Queen of Hell. At her approach, the hall fell silent. Of course it would. Ellen Seidel had heard the stories, but nothing could have prepared her for this. This was more than power, ambition, beauty, or even genius. In the legendary teacher's presence, such words seemed meaningless, devoured by an unrelenting, inescapable flame. Yet what was most startling, even terrifying, was her focus. Nothing about Shizuka Satomi seemed random, without purpose. Everything was measured, everything was arranged, everything was completely and sublimely composed. And suddenly, Ellen Seidel realized that everyone was watching her, the Queen of Hell. As everyone was watching her, the Queen of Hell was watching them. Perfectly polite, perfectly unapproachable. She seemed to measure, question, and disregard them all. Then she stopped. Tamako was standing now, quivering, her eyes wavering for the first time. "Tamiko," Ellen silently implored. "Don't look down, look at her." And then Shizuka Satomi, the Shizuka Satomi, nodded, took off her sunglasses, and glanced into Tamiko Giselle Grohl's eyes. So that was the Grohl girl. Pretty. But of course she was. Tremon said she was supremely gifted. But of course she was. Shizuka entered the main hall and found a seat in the back. Even there she felt people watching her, gossiping no doubt. Whatever. Appearance, reputation, even training or desire, none of that mattered now. The organizers made the usual announcements. A parent forgot to bring cough drops. The lights dimmed. Now, let's hear her play. After the preliminaries of any competition, the foyer fills with the chatter of parents, teachers, and musicians. There is triumph, heartbreak, arguing, predictions of who might advance to the final rounds. It can be a spectacle all its own. Yet this afternoon, the conversations were dominated by another topic entirely. Shizuka Satomi was here. "I think she's living in Lucerne." "Tokyo last I heard." "Wait, how old is she?" "Here's my phone. I want you to take a picture." "Let's take a picture with her together." And then there she was. Just as before, silence fell throughout the hall, but this time it was not from shock. People knew she was there. People were expecting her. Most of them rightly assumed that she was searching for her next student, her next star. Yet as Shizuka Satomi moved through them, the San Gabriel Valley's finest found their hearts faltering between notes, their music unraveled and wanting. Those who had thought to speak to the Queen of Hell suddenly felt small and invisible, as if they had nothing significant to say. Two people, however, approached her. "Miss Satomi, thank you so much for coming to watch the competition. I'm Ellen Seidel, and this is Tamiko Giselle Grohl." Shizuka glanced at them both. Was that a smile? "You sent me that note, remember?" Ellen asked, her voice straining with pride, desire, and terror. "Of course," Shizuka Satomi finally said. "Your student is the reason that I'm here." Tamako Giselle Gruel could not restrain herself any longer. The Queen of Hell was right in front of her. Right in front of her. "Kiana Choi studied with you, right?" she blurted. Yes, she did. "Kiana's my hero. I want to be just like her." For the last time, Shizuka Satomi looked at Tamako Gruel. The girl had been poised and engaging, technically near flawless. How appropriate. The Queen of Hell reached for her sunglasses, then tilted her head in a most exquisite way. "No, you don't." By the time anyone could react, Shizuka Satomi had floated to the exit and out the door. Astrid was peeling tangerines when the door opened. "Welcome back, Miss Satomi. I trust it went—" Her voice trailed off. One look at Miss Satomi told Astrid everything she needed to know. "I'll get dinner started right away." Miss Satomi took off her sunglasses and rubbed her eyes. "Astrid, tonight, maybe just some miso soup?" "Of course, Miss Satomi." Astrid tried not to seem alarmed. "Why don't you take a nap?" "No, I'll be in the backyard." "Yes, Miss Satomi." Astrid went to the kitchen and heated some water. To that she added bonito stock, sliced radish, seaweed, Miss Satomi's favorite white miso, a beaten egg, and finally some sliced fish cake. Miso soup. Miss Satomi asked for it only when she was ill or exhausted. Of course she would be. She had returned from Tokyo to a hometown she once left forever, all for the promise of a seventh soul. Miss Satomi had staked everything on this move, on the Gruel girl. She had been so hopeful, so sure. But if this wasn't the right student either? Soon the kitchen filled with the gentle aroma of the simmering soup. Astrid dropped the heat to low so it would be ready when Miss Satomi returned. And then Astrid waited. For now, that's all she could do. No, no, no. Shizuka walked outside to her backyard. Automatically, she circled the persimmon tree and avoided an old, uneven cobblestone next to the fish pond. Treymon. In the fish pond, the same koi glided among the water lilies. Beyond that, the same hill dropped away, the same unending vista of homes, cars, and places to drive them. Treymon. So this Gruel girl wanted to be like Kiana Choi? Really? She would damn herself for that? Why be like someone else? Where was the vision, the genius? As an agent of damnation, Shizuka understood that she would be dealing in the tedium of human weakness. But there had to be more. Treymon, where are you? You don't need to shout, Shizuka. I'm right here. Mouth breathing, dress shoes, a plodding half cadence of what she knew far too well. To some, Treymon Philippe might have appeared stately, cultured. However, Shizuka had always thought of her facilitator as a particularly well-dressed toad. What was that? I traveled across an ocean to hear that? You told me she was special. Shizuka paused. This was not entirely his fault. She, too, had been wrong. Also, with Treymon, she needed to be cautious. People had named her the Queen of Hell, but Treymon was a demon. A real one. I'm sorry, Treymon. That was my frustration talking. It has been a long and disappointing day. Of course, Shizuka. No harm done. But I don't understand. Shouldn't we be celebrating? After all, the Gruel girl is brilliant, beautiful, and hungry. I told you. That's not enough this time. Time? Time is exactly what you don't have. Don't you think I know that? Shizuka walked to the fish pond. She stared at the koi swimming silently in the dark. Why are you making this difficult? It's simple math. 6 + 1 = freedom. And that one is somewhere close. I can still sense it.
Where? Down there?
Tremont gestured downhill to the lights of Monterey Park.
Doing what? Nibbling on dumplings? Perhaps roasting a duck? Honestly, my dear, what are you thinking?
What if I told you that hell would receive something special to remember me by?
Would you really expect me to believe that you're risking your existence out of an affection for hell?
Of course not. But the seventh will be worth the wait, for all of us.
Very well, Shizuka,
Tremont finally said.
For now I will play along, if only because your past souls have been so well received. But remember, you have been allotted 7 times, 7 years to deliver 7 souls. 48 of those years have passed. If you do not free yourself by this time next year, hell will have no need to remember you, for there you will be, every special day, every special moment, for all eternity.
With that, Tremont Philippe was gone. Katrina checked her phone. Good, she had a signal. Quickly, she sent another text to Evan. She hadn't worked out the details, but she'd settle in with Evan for a while, find a job, then start making more music videos. Beyond that, she'd figure it out. Katrina winced as the bus shifted lanes. She clutched her violin and eventually drifted back to sleep. When she next awoke, the bus was rumbling off of Rosemead Boulevard and into the parking lot of Shun Fat, a huge Asian wholesale market and restaurant supply complex. Already, people were waiting to pick up relatives. Katrina tried to wake herself as she got off the bus and waited at the sidewalk for her bag. The 2 old women studied her and whispered. One pointed at her face. Katrina touched her face, then looked down at her sleeve. Crap. While asleep, her foundation had rubbed off, which meant they saw the bruises. Her black eye. These old ladies were strangers. Their looks couldn't hurt her. Their stares and judgments were nothing compared with what she'd been through. She told herself that this shouldn't hurt. It was nothing. And nothing shouldn't hurt at all. Chapter 3. Lan Tran loved her donut, her giant concrete and plaster donut. Once common in LA's Eisenhower years, just a few of these giant donuts remained in greater Los Angeles. There were Kindle's Donuts, Dale's Donuts, and Randy's Donuts, of course. Donut King, too, was in Gardena. In La Puente, there was the drive-through donut hole. And here, above El Monte, rose Stargate Donut. Lan's donut meant a future. Her donut meant a family. In the quiet night, Stargate Donut hummed, almost like a starship. Stationed in the front, her twins, Wendy and Edwin, navigated the donut case, stocking it with galaxies of sweet, colorful lemon creams, apple fritters, double chocolates, Boston creams, twists. At her back, Shirley and Auntie Floresta maintained operations, while below, Marcus was busy planning their next expansion. "Hello, Captain," the twins saluted. Lan returned their salute. "Carry on," she said with a satisfied smile. Shirley emerged from the back with a tray of chocolate eclairs. "The replicators are operating with intolerances, Mother." "Thank you, Shirley. But create the next batch with 30% less residual heat. We won't have many customers, so they don't need to be hot. We can save power that way." "Yes, Mother." Lan Tran stared out the window. The stars beckoned as they always had. One did not have to be a rocket scientist to make a donut, but that didn't mean it didn't help. A picture of Mr. and Mrs. Thamavong still hung on the wall. They had acquired Stargate Donut in 1979. At the time, it was known as El Monte Donuts. The Thamavongs sold classic, American-style donuts made with happiness and care, and in the 80s, video games became popular, so the Thamavongs brought them into their store. Almonte Donuts became known not only for apple fritters, but for Pac-Man, Asteroids, and Defender. Their most popular game by far was Stargate. Dedicated video game players would spend hour after hour, quarter after quarter, rescuing people from an alien invasion that would never ever cease. Eventually, the Thamavongs decided to buy rather than rent first one, then two, and finally 3 Stargate machines. Since they kept them in good playing condition, their shop became known informally as Stargate Donuts. Eventually, Mr. Thamavong changed the name of Almonte Donuts officially to Stargate Donut, with the double R to avoid any trademark trouble. Even after the video game craze passed, the name stuck over the years, and up until when the Thamavongs were ready to retire. By then, they had realized that they had put so much love into the shop, they'd forgotten about having children to take over their business. Developers began to inquire. Some even offered a fair price. But Mrs. Thamavong would look at her big donut and cry. Their entire lives were in that donut. Then one night, the Thamavongs received an email from a woman named Lan Tran. Miss Tran said that she wanted Stargate Donut because of their big donut. The sale was completed almost immediately. There was no bargaining. They named a price, and this woman agreed. Even better, she promised that Stargate Donut would keep selling donuts and shine like a beacon into the night. The Thamavongs spent 3 weeks with Lan and her family to teach them their basic operations and how to run their equipment. They then handed their treasured recipe book and keys to Miss Tran and retired, full of good memories and good American currency, to Laos and their beloved Viante. Once they left, Lan put the recipe book away. Instead of cooking, she had her crew digitally convert and store 24 of each type of donut the Thamavongs had made. These reference donuts would then be quickly and virtually perfectly reproduced in the ship's replicators. The result? Cake donuts would always be colorful and pretty. Yeast donuts would be invariably golden and soft. No surprises, no worries. Eventually, her crew might learn to make donuts as the Thamavongs did. But for now, Lan's duty was to their safety and their mission. Besides, donuts were not the sole reason why Lan Tran and her crew were on this planet. Lan strode past the kitchen and opened what had been the door to the cleaning closet. But instead of mops and buckets, behind it was a shiny new elevator leading down to the recently completed lower level, which now housed the control center, research laboratory, sick bay, and living compound, as well as an underground hangar for their starship. Here at Stargate Donut, Lan and her family would safely wait out the fall of the Galactic Empire, continue their work, and live undisturbed as long as Mr. Thamavong stressed, they gave donuts to the police officers for free. Captain, Marcus Tran saluted as she entered the research lab. Lieutenant, how are the modifications going? The donut is smaller than ideal, but it's nothing we can't address. Please note the modifications I've made. With your approval, I will begin implementing them immediately. Lan looked over the plans and nodded. Her son had become quite the engineer, hadn't he? What about power? As predicted, preparing this complex depleted over 62% of our power reserves, but it will be at least 3 months before they return to normal levels, but our day-to-day operation should not be affected. However, there is a greater concern. The Stargate? Yes, Captain. Even at 100%, our ship's main reactor would be far from adequate. We need to find an external power source, but this civilization's energy production falls short by several orders of magnitude. This was no surprise. After all, this planet hadn't yet harnessed fusion, let alone point singularities or antimatter. I've been working on a solution for that, Lan said. For now, continue fabrication and lower power tests. You may also divert 10% of the ship's power when we're not running the replicator. Understood, ma'am. Will that be all? See? He called her Mom. No, he said ma'am. He said Mom. The twins rushed toward her as the elevator closed behind them. Edwin! Windy! Didn't I tell you not to run in the halls? Your brother is tuning the warp field, and why aren't you at your posts? Sorry, they said in unison. So you two, what is this all about? We wanted to know, Edwin started, that now that we're off the ship, should we call you Mom or Captain? I want to call you Captain, said Windy, saluting. Lan saluted back. She tried not to smile. Very well, Ensign Wendy. But sometimes can I call you Mom? Edwin said. He grabbed her waist and held on tight. Oh, Edwin, settling on one name will be difficult, won't it? What matters is that we're together and safe. And that means no more running through the halls. We don't want anyone to get hurt, right? Yes, Mom. Aye, aye, Captain. Good. Now back up to the story, you two. Don't you have jobs to do? Lan watched them running back to their posts. She shook her head and smiled. Family. She would cross a universe for her family. In fact, she already had. From what Astrid could gather, the house next to Miss Satomi's had been owned by a Japanese family, then a Mexican family, and now a Chinese one. Yet, more than anything, this neighborhood reminded her of her childhood in Switzerland, of her grandmother bent over her carrots, peas, and asparagus. For whatever was parked in the driveway, whether VW or Toyota or Chevy or Mercedes, every family here seemed to have a grandmother, and every garden seemed to have vegetables. Astrid had arrived a month before Miss Satomi to prepare the house. Luckily, Miss Satomi had retained a groundkeeper, so the persimmon tree was healthy and the fish pond was fine. But Miss Satomi's garden had been woefully underused, and though Astrid was no grandmother, she would plant vegetables. Turnips, cabbage, perhaps aubergines. If she started now, they would be ready by next year. Then again, next year, would she or Miss Satomi even be here? Astrid's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. On the porch were a bag of green beans and 2 bitter melons. Astrid waved to the old lady next door, who bowed and waved back. Astrid looked at her newfound bounty. The beans she knew how to prepare, but bitter melon? Grandma Strafelda's in Freiburg had never grown a bitter melon. Los Angeles has days of blue sky, mountains, beach, 82 degrees, and palm trees all around. But LA truly becomes a paradise on those rare days with clear traffic, no obstacles, no accidents, just miles and miles of pure, smooth road, and any lane to choose. However, Shizuka was not driving on one of those days. A truck had lost a mattress just before the 605 interchange. The river of cars jostled her insides with stop and go, surge and swell. Worst of all, the Queen of Hell had to pee. Urine-filled water bottles litter the LA freeway system for good reason. The entire LA basin is filled with bathroom dead zones, often near industrial areas and freeways where one cannot find public toilets. Yet not everyone can urinate into a plastic water bottle. At least there was a McDonald's near the next exit, for now Shizuka tried to concentrate on more pressing things. Pressing. Okay, Satomi. Bad choice of words. Anyhow, the seventh. After Arcadia, Shizuka had received a second letter from Ellen Seidel, begging her to hear Tamako Giselle Grohl once more at the finals. Tremont Philippe had visited again as well, needlessly reminding her that a musician with Tamako's gifts would be ready for world-class competition within a couple of months, if not sooner. Even Astrid had voiced her concern. She recalled how long Miss Satomi had been searching, how exhausted she sounded when asking for miso soup, and that even if Miss Grohl wasn't perfect, might she not be enough? Once her contract was settled, would Miss Satomi not have all the time in the world? Shizuka yawned. She was almost over her jet lag, but not quite. But even fully rested, could she ever make a demon like Tremon understand? The Gruel girl was ready and willing. She said she wanted to be just like Kiana Choi. She played like it. Every note the girl played had been an homage, a vow, a promise to give everything for a chance at recognition, at fame. And then there was Astrid. Shizuka knew how much Astrid worried about her. 6 times, Shizuka Satomi had taken brilliant but flawed talents, taken their souls for a curse and some lies. What was the harm in just one more? How could Shizuka make them understand? Of course, she couldn't. She wasn't sure if she herself understood who the seventh was, what the seventh was. But even so, Shizuka Satomi could not let this student, this music, pass her by. The seventh. Where was the seventh hiding? She could sense them, almost hear them. And then Shizuka panicked. She had been so deep in thought that McDonald's and its restroom were already several exits behind her. Shizuka swerved around a pickup truck and a Lexus, rode the shoulder off the next ramp, and gunned her Jaguar off the exit. Desperately, frantically, Shizuka searched for a business with a restroom, but all she saw was residential street after residential street. Damn these suburbs! Then, in her rising sea of despair, she saw it. Peeking over from behind the trees was the big donut. Of course! Shizuka remembered the big donut from her childhood. She'd never actually been inside. Her parents had been strict about junk food after all. But now she was an adult, and no one was stopping her. She beelined for the Stargate donut, skidded to a stop, and raced inside. Once she entered, she rushed for the bathroom door, but no door was there. Then she remembered something horrible. This was not Japan. This was El Monte. Shizuka almost sobbed out loud. In Japan, donut shop bathrooms were clean and available. But here? Shizuka had seen LA donut shops say no to children. She'd seen them turn away white men in business suits. No one used donut shop bathrooms unless they were employees or police. Also, everyone was staring. Whether with musicians or not, Shizuka still carried herself like the queen of hell. Some customers looked away. Others seemed frightened. An old woman crossed herself. No, no, no! What to do next? Maybe she could find a gas station, maybe a supermarket, maybe a tree. She had signed over her soul to hell. Surely she had been through worse than this, hadn't she? But just as all hope was lost, a donut lady appeared at the counter. Yes? Shizuka took off her sunglasses and bowed her head. Ma'am, I know it's not for the public, but may I please use your bathroom? She said as politely as she could. Come around the back. In disbelief, Shizuka looked up into the eyes of what must be the nicest Los Angeles donut lady in existence. Surely show her. But mother, show her the bathroom, Donut Lady said pleasantly but firmly. Just follow her, miss. Shizuka liked this donut lady. She really liked this donut lady. The girl called Shirley led Shizuka down a passageway that stretched a little further back than Shizuka expected. And there were noises here that didn't match the sounds of a kitchen. Instead of motorized fryers, the commercial mixers, and the intermittent click of oven thermostats, the air was alive with soft whirs, hums, pure sine wave tones, regular chirps. And the sound came from everywhere, from beneath her and overhead. Shizuka wasn't going to mention it. She was the last person with the right to probe into someone else's business. Thank you. I know you wouldn't normally let someone use... Then Shizuka froze as her being was pierced by gentle yet supremely powerful music. No, not quite music. And not only the air. It was deep and resonant and harmonious like an Aeolian harp coursed with the strings of space itself. Beautiful. Ma'am? What is this sound? Oh, it's probably my brother, the girl said too quickly. He's on his computer playing one of his games. The girl was lying, of course. This was no computer game. But this wasn't time to pry, not with a full bladder. Shizuka was led to a door with a handwritten sign that said, "For employee only." Behind it lay the cleanest bathroom a woman might hope for. At last, Shizuka peed. She hummed Beethoven's Ode to Joy. She thanked the ancestors. She thanked the gods. If it hadn't been spoken for, she'd have given her soul to Jesus right there. As she finished, Shizuka heard footsteps and a muffled conversation. The beautiful sound faded, then vanished altogether. It would have been nice to know what that sound was, but she had imposed enough. Shizuka freshened up, returned the key, then got in line. She didn't feel right just leaving. And besides, fresh donuts? She ended up behind a group of boys. One of them ordered the largest donut she'd ever seen. What is that? It's an Alaska donut, the boy nervously replied. Alaska donut. Kindle's has a Texas donut, but the boy tried not to stare as he explained. The Stargate one is bigger. Shizuka finished the sentence for him. Yeah, that's what she said. One of the other youths joked. Lucky her, Shizuka let herself say. The boys looked away shyly, still too young to respond. And then, once again, Shizuka was in front of the donut lady. May I help you? I would like an Alaska donut and a small coffee, please. Donut lady's eyes. They were dark, almost too dark for this world, and yet somehow they reminded Shizuka of old Mr. Grossmuller, who had survived Bergen-Belsen and devoted the rest of his life to playing Handel. Donut lady placed Shizuka's coffee and donut on a tray. Thank you. No, thank you, Shizuka said, shaking herself to attention. After all, this woman had saved her life. Donut lady smiled, and Shizuka felt herself fall into a field of stars. Somehow, Shizuka managed to take her tray to a clean table. She needed to clear her head. This was no time for infatuation. It was already February. She had a student to find, a demon to feed, her soul to save. Then Shizuka bit into the soft, sticky Alaska donut. It was second grade, and Mrs. Jennison had brought donuts to class. She said something about an American orbiting the Earth, and he was called an astronaut. Shizuka took a glazed one, and Julie Kiyama took a red, white, and blue sprinkle. The fruit punch was red and cold and sweet. The donuts were happy and fluffy and even better than the peach cobbler in the cafeteria. Wait, why was her coffee cold? How long had she been staring out the window? Mrs. Jennison? Second grade? Where had that memory come from? Where was her mind? She must still be jet-lagged. She glanced at Donut Lady. Donut Lady glanced back. Shizuka felt herself blushing and immediately looked away. Come on, Satomi, focus. This wasn't the time to daydream or make eyes at Donut Ladies. Somewhere out there was the next student. She wrapped her remaining half of the Alaska donut, put on her sunglasses, and left without looking back. But as Shizuka drove away, she could not forget Donut Lady's starry, faraway eyes. Was it her appearance? Yes, but more than that, her voice. Lan had heard many voices since arriving to Earth, but that sunglass lady worked this very ordinary oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere into something beautiful. Mother. Or maybe it was the way she held herself. Her posture was effortless, elegant, as if denying the planet's gravitational field. Mother? Lan pulled herself from her reverie. How long had Shirley been standing there? That woman, I'm positive that she heard the space warp. Shirley lowered the last part to a whisper. What? Lan looked at her sharply and shushed Shirley back to the kitchen. What do you mean she heard the warp? Marcus was running a low-level continuity test when that woman asked about the sound. This is not good, Lan thought. This was not good at all. If Sunglass Lady was versed in warp theory, she would know that what they were doing. She might identify their harmonic signature or even discern the specific warp profile and guess their origin. Was there any indication that she identified the signature? Shirley shook her head. She seemed surprised more than anything. Lan tried to steady her breathing. Sometimes these bodies were not easy to control. Yes, of course. There was no way Sunglass Lady was a warp expert. They were on a technologically primitive planet in El Monte. Good, but we should be careful. Still, what was a being like that doing in a place like this? But Mother, why did you let her use the bathroom? Why did she let her use the bathroom? Mr. Thumbavong warned that they needed to be careful about the bathroom. Why had she said yes? I don't know. I just wanted to help, and she was in need, and... Wait, do you think it was mind control? If it were mind control, we would have sensed it, right? I detected no psi activity, Shirley said. And Mother, it is not unlike you to help someone in need. Yes, of course, she would help someone in need, especially someone like Sunglass Lady. Lan remembered how she'd said, I would like an Alaska donut and a small coffee, please. Like mathematics, so clear, so pure. Mother? What, had she drifted again? I'll make sure to turn off the warp circuitry next time she's here, Shirley finally said. Next time? Lan felt her heart skip and her face smile. What was she doing? There was no time for Sunglass Lady. She needed to lead her crew. She needed to protect her family. Thank you, Shirley. That will be all. Captain Lan glanced toward the front of the store, then walked into the control center. The space around her was filled with the soft, glorious hum of the warp field. It was the second most beautiful sound she'd heard today. And that is where we're stopping. Oh, I'm so glad I got through that chapter because that made me so happy. It was so sweet. Oh, I hope you guys are enjoying this. Thank you so much for coming.